The sun was shining softly over the city that morning. Kamala Harris, now one of the most recognized women in American politics, was preparing for what looked like a simple event, a small visit to a community center in East Oakland. The media wasn't invited. It was supposed to be quiet, respectful, and peaceful. But peace doesn't always last. She arrived with her team just before 10 a.m., wearing a navy blue suit and a warm smile. She always smiled when she visited places like this school's youth shelters, food banks, because it reminded her why she started. The people, the children, the stories, not the politics. Inside, the atmosphere was warm. Children were playing. Volunteers were setting up chairs. A small group of women, most of them single mothers, had gathered to hear her speak. There were no big cameras, just a few cell phones and some local community staff. But someone else was there too. His name was Officer Mark Danner. Mark had been assigned to the event just 2 hours before it began. He wasn't part of the usual security team. He was a city officer, tall, built, cold eyes. He had a reputation among his coworkers. He didn't smile, he didn't talk much, and if he didn't like you, you could feel it in your bones. No one knew why he had agreed to take this small assignment. He stood near the back of the hall, arms folded, eyes sharp. But there was something strange in his stare, not just focus, something else, like recognition, like history. When Kamala walked in, he didn't move, but his eyes locked on her, and they didn't blink. Kamala gave her usual warm greeting. She shook hands, hugged 2 elderly women, and even knelt down to tie a child's shoelace. Everyone saw her kindness. Everyone smiled, everyone, except Mark. He stood still, watching. His face didn't move, but his breathing did. It got heavier. Kamala's assistant Alina noticed him too. Something about the officer's body language didn't sit right. He wasn't just standing guard. He was watching Kamala like he was waiting for something personal. She walked over to him quietly and said, "Are you with the security detail today?" He nodded without looking at her. Then added coldly, "I go where I'm told." It wasn't a friendly answer, and it wasn't just rude. It was warning. As Kamala walked toward the front of the room to begin her small talk with the mothers, Mark suddenly stepped forward. Not fast, but not slow either. Just close enough. He stood just 3 feet away from her. Her team noticed and gently tried to step in, but Kamala raised her hand slightly to stop them. She was used to people approaching her. She believed in facing them with grace, not fear. But then he said something. No one could hear it clearly. It was whispered. Just 2 words. Kamala's eyes froze for half a second. Her smile fell, just a little. Then she quickly recovered. She thanked the mothers and began to speak, her voice steady but her heart was not. Alina watched closely. She had seen Kamala in storms before, angry crowds, tough interviews, heartbreaking town halls. But this reaction was different. This wasn't politics. This was personal. After the event ended, Kamala walked straight to her car. No handshakes, no selfies. Inside the vehicle, she sat silently. Alina climbed in after her and finally asked, "Who was he?" Kamala didn't answer right away. Then, in a soft voice, she said, "He used to be someone I trusted, a long time ago." Back inside the center, Officer Mark didn't stick around. He left through a back exit. No one saw him go. No one asked him any questions. He disappeared like fog. But not without leaving something behind. In the corner of the room, taped quietly to a table, was a folded piece of paper. No name, no message. Just a torn black and white photo. A photo of Kamala when she was 2 and standing. Beside her was him. Mark. Smiling. The next day, the photo reached Kamala's office. No note. No explanation. Just the image. Kamala stared at it for a long time. Her hands didn't shake, but her eyes grew distant, like she had traveled back 30 years in just a moment. Alina watched her closely. Finally, Kamala said, "That photo, that moment, was the last time I ever saw him." "What happened?" Alina asked. Kamala didn't answer, but her silence said everything. There was pain in it, deep pain, the kind that doesn't leave easily. Meanwhile, on the local police system, Officer Mark Danner's file had been locked, access restricted, reason reassigned to private duty. But no one in the department could explain where he was sent or who approved it. Outside in the city, the news was starting to buzz. Someone had leaked a small rumor. Something happened at the community center during VP Harris's visit. Security acted strange, staff uncomfortable. She left early. The press hadn't caught on yet, but the people were already talking, and the real story, it hadn't even begun. The next morning, the city moved as usual. Cars passed, people rushed to work, and the community center where Kamala Harris had spoken the day before was already preparing for its next event. But deep inside the building, in a small locked room marked security control, something unusual was happening. A young intern named Lena had arrived early. She wasn't supposed to be there that day, but she had left her notebook behind and needed it for her college project. She walked through the quiet hallways and reached the security room. No one else was around. The door was slightly open. That was strange. It was always locked. Lena pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room smelled like coffee and old paper. 3 computer screens showed empty hallways. A black recorder, Light blinked slowly. Lena looked around. That's when she noticed one of the speakers was still on. Soft static buzzed from it. Then she heard it. A voice, a low male voice, whispering something. She froze. The voice said, "I told you I'd see you again." She leaned closer. Another voice answered. A woman's voice. Familiar. Kamala Harris. She sounded calm but surprised. "This isn't the time or place." Then silence. Then a click. The feed ended. Lena's heart raced. She rewound the file and played it again. It was real. This was from yesterday, and the voice of the man Officer Mark Danner was clear. He had whispered something to the vice president, and it was recorded by the security feed. Lena's fingers trembled. She didn't know what to do. Should she tell someone? Would she get in trouble? What if she just erased it and walked away? But something inside her told her to keep it. This wasn't just gossip. This felt dangerous. Lena copied the short audio clip onto her flash drive, hid it deep in her bag, and left the room quietly. She didn't even grab her notebook. Her hands were sweating. By noon, Lena was sitting in a quiet cafe across from her best friend, Josh, who also interned at the center. She plugged in her flash drive and hit play. They both listened. Josh looked shocked. "That's him, Officer Danner. What the hell is going on?" Lena whispered. Kamala knew him. She wasn't scared, but something felt wrong. Josh shook his head. "You need to show this to someone." Lena looked down. "But who?" Meanwhile, in Washington, Kamala sat at her desk staring at the black and white photo found at the community center. She had told no one what Mark whispered, not even Alina, but the memory was clear. He had said, "I still remember what you did." Those words weren't just words. They were a wound from the past. And now they were back. Alina entered the room holding a folder. "Ma'am, I checked with the city police. Officer Danner was never supposed to be at that event." Kamala looked up. "Then, who sent him?" Alina shook her head. "We don't know yet. His name was added to the duty list just an hour before the event, and the person who added it," she handed Kamala a printed page. "It's a name that doesn't exist. In their system." Kamala stared at the paper. "Tyler Grant, no badge number, no rank, no record, a ghost." Something bigger was happening. This wasn't just a personal encounter, this was planned, back in Oakland. Lena sat in her room, replaying the clip again and again. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard. She typed an email. Official@whitehouse.gov. Subject, urgent private audio from Kamala Harris. Visit. "Hello. I work at the East Oakland Community Center. Yesterday, something happened between Vice President Harris and a police officer named Mark Danner. I found a recording. It may be important. I don't want trouble, but I think she needs to hear it. Please forward this to her security team. Lena M. She attached the file, then hesitated. Her finger hovered over the send button. What if this ruined her career? What if they ignored her? What if it put her in danger? But then she remembered Kamala's face. That half second where her smile disappeared. That silent pain, and Lena clicked send. At 6:42 p.m., the file reached the White House inbox. By 7:30. Kamala's security advisor was listening to it. By 8 o'clock, it was on Kamala's private phone. She listened to the clip in silence. When it ended, she didn't say a word, but she looked at Alina and said, "He wanted me to hear those words again. Not in private, but where the world could almost hear. He's not just sending a message, he's starting a game." Alina leaned forward. "Do we go public?" Kamala shook her head. "Not yet. I want to know who else is watching." The next day, Lena received a call from a blocked number. She didn't answer. Then a second call. Still no name. She answered carefully. "Hello." The voice on the other end was soft, controlled, and calm. "A woman? Lena? This is Alina. I work with Vice President Harris. We received your message, and we're grateful. You did the right thing." Lena's heart skipped a beat. Whispered, "Is she okay?" A pause then. "Not yet. But because of you, she will be." The city's news channels still hadn't caught on. But inside Kamala Harris's private office, the walls were closing in. The voice recording? The mysterious reappearance of Officer Mark Danner, the black and white photo, all of it pointed toward a past Kamala had locked away long ago. A past she never thought would return like this. But someone else had. Started asking questions. Someone who didn't even work for her. Daniel Ruiz was a freelance journalist. He wasn't famous. He didn't work for a big TV network. But he was sharp, quiet, focused, and unlike many reporters chasing gossip, Daniel chased truth. He had heard whispers about an odd interaction at the community center, a few anonymous tips. One even claimed the officer assigned that day wasn't listed on any public file. That was enough to make him curious. Daniel started digging. He searched old archives, police rosters, background checks until something caught his eye. An officer named Mark Danner had been removed from a political security rotation back in the early 2000s. Reason listed, personal conflict of interest. That phrase was unusual. That wasn't criminal. But it wasn't normal either. Daniel looked deeper, and there it was. A photo from an old campaign stop in San Francisco. Kamala, much younger, standing with a small group of people. One of them was Mark. Smiling. Standing close. Daniel zoomed in. The way he looked at her wasn't professional. It was personal. That same night, Daniel went to visit someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Sharon Danner, Mark's Older sister, she lived alone in a small house outside Sacramento. The porch light flickered. The air smelled like dried roses and old memories. She didn't open the door fully, just enough to see his face. "You here for my brother?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "I need to understand what happened between him and Kamala Harris." Sharon sighed deeply. She stepped back and opened the door. Inside, the house was quiet. No TV, no music. Just a ticking clock and the sound of a cat. Walking across the floor, Sharon sat down and looked Daniel in the eyes. "Mark was different when he was younger," she said, gentler, quiet, always looking for something to believe in. Daniel leaned forward. "Did he know Kamala?" Sharon nodded slowly. "They met in college. He admired her, followed her speeches, said she made him feel seen, but it changed. When she started rising, he didn't." She paused. Mark thought she left him behind. He applied to be on her security team when she started her political career. Got in, but something happened. After that, Daniel asked, "What happened?" Sharon stared at the floor. "I don't know. He stopped talking about her. One day he came home. Quiet, cold, said he got reassigned. That's when the photo disappeared from his desk." Daniel left with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just politics. It was personal. Mark Danner hadn't crossed paths with Kamala by accident. He had been waiting, watching, holding on to something for years. The next morning, Daniel published a small online article. It didn't go viral, but someone on Kamala's team read it, and within 2 hours, it reached her desk. Kamala sat silently as Alina read it aloud. When she finished, Kamala said nothing for a long time, then finally whispered, "He loved who I was, but hated who I became." Alina looked concerned. "Should we tell the press?" Kamala shook her head. "No, not yet." Then she said something Alina didn't expect. "I need to see him again." Back in Oakland, Officer Mark Danner hadn't returned to his station. His home address was empty. His badge had been dropped off in a mailbox. No note. No explanation. It was like he had vanished. But he hadn't gone far. He was watching and waiting. A hidden part of the city, inside a quiet apartment above a bookstore. Mark sat staring at an old photo album, page after page, each one filled with memories of her. Clippings, speeches, campaign posters, and then letters, unsent, written in his hand. One of them read, "You were the first person who made me feel like I mattered, but then you left me behind. You became a name. I became no one." He had kept them all, every letter, every headline, every picture, but none of it had helped him move on. Instead, it had grown into something darker, something twisted, something that brought him to that community center, to whisper words she would never forget. Meanwhile, Daniel Ruiz received a private message. No name, no sender, just a file. Inside, a copy of one of Mark's unsent letters. The subject line, "She still doesn't know what she did." Daniel stared at the message. He knew this story wasn't over. It was only beginning. And somewhere in Washington, Kamala stood in her private hallway. Facing a mirror, she looked at herself, not the vice president, not the public figure, but the woman who once sat in a university library, next to a quiet man with soft eyes and unspoken pain. A man who now walked in the shadows. She whispered, "I didn't forget you, Mark, but I had to keep moving. I didn't know staying still would break you. The walls of power are built to hide certain things, but sometimes, truth escapes through cracks. Forgotten cracks no one thinks to seal. At the East Oakland Community Center. Just 2 days after Kamala Harris's visit, a quiet IT technician named Noah Grant sat at his desk, sipping cold coffee and reviewing old footage from the event. It was part of a routine system check. The main footage had already been cleared by Secret Service, but Noah noticed something strange. A file labeled Cam 7 storage hallway. No one had opened it. In fact, no one even remembered there was a camera in that hallway. Noah clicked play. What he saw changed everything. The hallway was empty at first. Then, Kamala entered. She had just finished speaking to the group of mothers. She was smiling, but her walk was slow, thoughtful. She seemed lost in memory. Suddenly, Officer Mark Danner appeared from behind a corner. He wasn't part of the scheduled security path. He wasn't supposed to be there. He stepped into Kamala's space too close to as she stopped walking. He leaned in. The microphone didn't catch the words, but her face did. Everything, her smile faded, her jaw stiffened, and her eyes sharp. Then, she whispered something back, just a few words, and walked away. Noah paused the video. He stared at the screen. "What was that?" he whispered to himself. He checked the audio. Most of it was useless, only distant static and hums. But after enhancing the audio slightly, a faint sound came through. Mark's voice? "I kept every word you wrote me." Noah sat back. He didn't understand the full story. But he knew one thing. This wasn't just political, this was deeply personal. And the world had no idea. Instead of deleting the footage like usual, Noah saved it to a private drive and sent it to one person he trusted, Lena the intern, who had already sent Kamala the audio clip. His message was short. "You were right. This is bigger than us." Attached was the video file. Lena watched it 3 times in silence. Then she did the same thing she did before. She emailed it to Alina. No caption, just, "You need to see this." That night, Kamala sat alone in her study. Alina played the video on a secure tablet. Kamala didn't speak as she watched. When the moment with Mark appeared, she leaned forward slightly. Her face in the video, controlled but wounded, made her chest tighten. Then she saw it. The way he looked at her, not with love, not even hate, but with a strange longing, like someone who had built a life around a memory that never loved him back. When the video ended, Alina whispered, "What did you say to him?" Kamala answered softly, "I said, I never promised you forever." Alina's eyes widened. "You two were together." Kamala nodded. "Once, a long time ago. Before politics, he was kind, broken but kind. Then I changed. I had to. He never forgave me for that." Alina asked, "Why didn't you tell the press? Why not go public when all this started?" Kamala looked her straight in the eyes. "Because this isn't about protecting my image. It's about protecting people from his pain." Meanwhile, the video had leaked, not to the public but to Daniel Ruiz, the freelance journalist who had spoken to Mark's sister. An anonymous envelope arrived at his office. No name, no return address, just a flash drive. He played it once and knew immediately this would explode the story. But Daniel didn't rush to publish. He reached out to Sharon Danner again. This time she opened the door before he knocked. "I know why you're here," she said. Daniel held up the flash drive. "I think the world needs to see this." Sharon hesitated. Will it help her or destroy him? Daniel paused. "Maybe both." In a small room above a bookstore, Mark sat with his eyes closed. He had no phone, no TV, but he knew the video would surface, and he whispered to himself, "Let them see what they made me." Back in Washington, Kamala's press team gathered for an emergency meeting. The clip had reached several journalists. It hadn't gone viral yet, but it would soon. Alina asked, "Should we release a statement?" Kamala stood up. "No, I'll speak for myself." Later that night, she recorded a short video in her own words. Her voice was steady, her hands calm, no flashy editing, no music, just her. She said, "A man I once knew approached me recently. He was someone I cared for long ago. But time changed us. I chose a path of service, he chose silence. And now, his pain has returned in ways I never expected. I do not blame him, but I do not fear him either. Some wounds don't bleed on the skin, they bleed in silence, and it's time we stop pretending men like him don't exist. I forgive him, but I will not stand still." The video reached millions within hours. Most were stunned, some were angry, some praised her strength, others questioned her past, but the truth was out. And for the first time, Mark had no control over the story. At sunrise the next morning, Daniel published his full article, "The Silent Encounter: What Really Happened Between Kamala Harris and Officer Mark Danner." It included the video footage, audio from the hallway, Mark's letters, anonymously sourced, a quote from Sharon Danner, and Kamala's own statement. It ended with, "This was never just about politics. It was about a quiet storm to people, carried for years, and how truth, no matter how deeply buried, finds a way back to light." Kamala Harris's voice had echoed across millions of screens the night before. Her video, calm, emotional, and raw, spread like wildfire. It was not a press statement. It wasn't even political. It was human. But the world doesn't always know how to handle honesty. By morning, news anchors were already spinning their takes. The story was no longer just a quiet encounter at a community center. It had become a national headline. Vice President's hidden past with police officer revealed. Kamala's personal pain now public. A brave move or a political risk? Should the second most powerful woman in America be this vulnerable? The reactions came fast. Some called her brave, others called her reckless. Some said she showed strength. Others accused her of creating drama. But Kamala, she stayed silent. She had already said what needed to be said now. She was watching the world react. At a high school in Atlanta, a young black girl named Nia stood in front of her English class with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know powerful women could cry," she said. "She made me feel like I can speak." 2. In Chicago, a women's shelter hung her photo in their hallway, with a quote from her speech. "Some wounds bleed in silence." But in Washington, some politicians whispered behind closed doors. She should have kept that private. This could cost her. Too emotional. Kamala had faced these voices before, but this time, they hit harder. Because this pain wasn't political, it was personal. Alina walked into Kamala's office with a thick folder. "Emails, letters, calls, thousands," she said. Kamala looked up. "Positive or negative?" Alina smiled weakly. "Mostly good. But the ones that hurt stick out more." She handed Kamala one short email from a retired senator. "This is why emotions don't belong in power. You've just proved the point." Kamala read it quietly, then folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer. "Let them write. I'll keep walking." But even steel bends under pressure. That evening, Kamala sat in her private study. No camera, no microphone, no staff. Just her and her thoughts. She opened one of the old letters. Mark had written her back in college, letters she had never shown anyone. His handwriting was neat, careful, full of respect and confusion. You always said we'd take different paths. I didn't think that path would erase me. She closed the letter. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, not because she was afraid, but because she was tired. Somewhere far from D.C., in a small apartment, Mark Danner watched her video over and over. He didn't speak. He didn't smile, but something in his face had changed. His eyes didn't burn with anger anymore. They looked hollow. He muttered softly, "You turned my silence into strength. That was mine." The FBI had now quietly reopened their interest in him, not for what he had done yet, but for what he might do next. He had vanished again, left no trace. But his name was now on the radar. Back at the White House, an unexpected message arrived for Kamala. It came from an old friend, Michelle Obama. The note read, "You've done something I've never seen in this building. You've shown that pain doesn't make us weaker, it makes us real. Don't stop now. You're not alone." Kamala smiled for the first time in 2 days, not because she felt strong, but because she knew she was still standing. Later that night, Alina burst into the room with a shocked look. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Kamala looked up. Alina handed her a printed post from an online forum. I knew Mark. He was more than just angry. He kept records, photos, obsession-level stuff. I used to be his roommate. I tried to tell someone, but no one cared. Kamala read the post twice, then whispered, "He wasn't just hurt, he was planning something." Suddenly the situation changed. This wasn't about public opinion anymore. This wasn't about emotion, or speeches, or damage control. It was now about safety. For her, for others, for truth. A security meeting was called the next morning. Silent alarms were added to Kamala's route. Staff were instructed to report anything unusual. FBI analysts were sent to Mark's last known address. Inside, they found a locked box filled with old newspaper clippings, letters, and surveillance maps. He had been following Kamala's moves for over 10 years. The box also contained something more disturbing, a handwritten note. Asterisk, "She forgot me, but I'll make sure the world remembers." Asterisk. Kamala was briefed. Her face didn't flinch, but Alina saw the fear in her eyes for the first time. "Do we cancel the next appearance?" Alina asked. Kamala shook her head. "No, I've been silent before. That's what let this grow in the dark. I'm not hiding anymore." The interview was scheduled for Friday evening, a primetime spot. Live, no cuts, no edits, no scripts. Kamala Harris was about to speak, not in a quiet hallway, not through a video message, but face-to-face with the entire nation. She knew the risks. But this time, the silence was heavier than any storm. The room buzzed with preparation. Lights, cameras, makeup, microphones, people moving like clockwork. Everyone seemed nervous. Everyone except Kamala. She sat still in the green room, wearing a calm expression and a dark gray suit. Her hands rested in her lap. Her phone was off. She wanted no distractions. Across the building, the interviewer, Grace Sinclair, reviewed her notes. She was known for her hard questions and no-nonsense tone. But even Grace knew this wasn't a normal interview. This was a moment the world was waiting for. Back at the White House, security teams were on full alert. Rumors about Officer Mark Danner had grown darker. He hadn't been seen in 5 days. The last trace, a motel in Nevada where he left behind a note. Sometimes silence screams the loudest. But there was no proof of his location now. No digital trail, no phone, no credit cards. Like a shadow walking through daylight. Just 1 hour before the live broadcast, a brown box arrived at the studio. No return label, no markings, just a plain package, hand-delivered. It was left at the front desk with a note, for Kamala's eyes only. Grace's producer brought the box into the green room carefully. "Ma'am," he said, "this was just delivered." Kamala frowned. "Who sent it?" "No one knows." She looked at the box. It wasn't large, light in weight, but something about it felt heavy. Alina, standing nearby, stepped forward. "Let me open it first." Kamala nodded. Alina slowly opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of newspaper, a silver chain, and a single Polaroid photo. Kamala reached for the photo. Her hand trembled. It was a picture of her and Mark, sitting on a bench during college. She remembered that day. It was raining. They had been talking about dreams, future, politics, love, everything. But what sent a chill down her spine wasn't the photo. It was what was written on the back, in his handwriting. Asterisk, "You forgot me, but I never forgot this moment. Don't lie to them tonight, or I'll tell them myself." Asterisk. Alina's face turned pale. "He's watching." Kamala stood still for a long moment, then slowly sat down. "Let him watch," she said. "The truth doesn't fear him anymore." Minutes later, the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Good evening," Grace began. "Tonight, we sit down with Vice President Kamala Harris." After a week of emotional headlines and a past that has shaken the nation, Kamala nodded politely. "Thank you for having me." Grace didn't wait long. "You said this was personal. You said you forgave him, but people still have questions. Why now? Why speak now?" Kamala took a breath, her voice steady, her tone calm. "Because I've spent years believing that silence was the best answer to pain. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But pain doesn't disappear when ignored. It grows. And now, that pain has become a threat not just to me but to others. So I won't hide anymore. Grace leaned in. Was it a relationship? Kamala didn't blink. Yes, it was. We were young. I cared for him deeply, but our dreams were different. I moved forward. He didn't. Grace asked, did you know he kept letters? Photos? That he followed your life all these years? Kamala's eyes didn't flinch. No. And that's what hurts the most. Because I moved on. But he stayed in that one moment. And now, he's trying to make the world live there too. Grace asked the final question softly. Are you afraid? Kamala looked directly into the camera. No, not anymore. Because fear is what kept this story hidden, and truth is the only thing that can break the silence. The live feed ended with a long applause from the studio audience. People across the country watched in silence. Some cried, some clapped, some just sat in thought, but no one ignored it. Back in the control room, Alina wiped away a tear. Grace didn't go easy on her, someone said. Alina smiled. She didn't need her to. Elsewhere in the city, in a quiet diner, a man sat at the counter wearing a black hoodie and dark jeans. He was alone. No one knew him, but the cook noticed he hadn't touched his coffee, just stared at the TV screen above the counter. It was showing Kamala's interview. When it ended, the man stood up, dropped a $5 bill, and left. The cook later told police he didn't say a word, but he looked like someone who had just lost everything. That night, Kamala sat alone in her private quarters. She looked at the silver chain from the box. It had been hers years ago, a birthday gift from her aunt. She had lost it long ago. Mark had kept it all these years, not out of love, but out of possession. Alina walked in with a folder. Ma'am, FBI just found something. In his storage locker. Kamala looked up. What? Alina placed a photo on the table. It was a blueprint of a building. The very same studio where Kamala had just finished her live interview. The blueprint on Kamala's desk didn't lie. It was a copy of the TV studio's floor plan marked with hand-drawn notes, red circles, and arrows. It showed entry points, security blind spots, emergency exits. Mark Danner hadn't just shown up randomly. He had studied the building. Planned, but watched. He had been closer than anyone. Thought. Kamala stared at the photo in silence. Alina stood beside her, holding a folder from the FBI. Ma'am, she said carefully, he knew your schedule, the broadcast, your dressing room, everything. Kamala's eyes narrowed. So someone gave him that information? Alina nodded. We think he had help. Kamala turned slowly. You mean someone on the inside? Back at the FBI field, Office Agent Tom Delgado gathered a task force. His job was now bigger than tracking Mark. It was about preventing the next move. Delgado spoke with urgency. This isn't about one man anymore. This is about a breach. Someone leaked her location. Someone wanted her exposed. A young tech officer raised her hand. We traced a signal from the broadcast control room. Someone accessed restricted files the night before the interview. Who? Delgado asked. The officer hesitated. Her name is Marla Jensen, works in stage lighting. Temporary hire. No red flags. Delgado frowned. Bring her in, quietly. Meanwhile, Mark Danner sat in a dark motel room in Reno, Nevada. The walls were bare. His phone was turned off. The room smelled like dust and gasoline. He had a notebook open on the table, filled with scribbles, names, circles. Kamala's name was everywhere, but something else was there now. A new name. Daniel Ruiz, the journalist. Mark had seen Daniel's article. He had watched the interviews. And now, he knew Daniel had access to things he never gave him. Photos. Letters. Evidence. Someone was leaking his past. Mark clenched his fists. They're not just ignoring me, he whispered. They're erasing me. Back in Washington, Kamala sat with her legal advisor and Alina, reviewing the latest intel. We can't ignore this anymore, Alina said. He's not going to stop. Kamala looked down at her hands. I know. Her voice was softer now, but I also know what happens. When I let fear make my choices, that's how women like me get silenced. The legal advisor spoke gently. Then what's your next step? Kamala looked out the window. I want to find him before he finds someone else. Suddenly, the room phone rang. Only 3 people had that number. Alina picked it up. Her face changed instantly. She covered the mouthpiece and whispered, It's Daniel Ruiz. He says it's urgent. Kamala nodded. Put him through. Daniel's voice came through, shaky but calm. I don't know how he did it, but Mark contacted me. Kamala froze. Alina mouthed. He's talking to Mark. Daniel continued. He sent me another letter, but this time, he left a location, an abandoned church. He wants to talk. He says he's ready to be seen. Kamala closed her eyes for a moment, then said, Do not go alone. Daniel agreed. I won't, but... Kamala, there's something else. What he said, something that doesn't make sense. He wrote, You weren't the only one I followed. Kamala's breath caught. What does that mean? I don't know, Daniel replied, but I'm going to find out. Hours later, Daniel stood outside the old church on the edge of town. A federal agent stood nearby in an unmarked car, watching every move. Inside the church, Daniel walked slowly. Dust floated through broken sunlight. Old Pews leaned sideways. The air was dry and heavy. Then he saw a figure in the front row. Mark, older, paler, eyes hollow, but calm. Daniel stepped forward. I got your letter. Mark didn't turn. He spoke quietly. I didn't want it to be like this. Daniel stayed quiet. Mark continued. They all left me. She left me. But the worst part, she didn't even hate me. She just forgot me. Daniel asked, why now? Mark turned, his face twisted in a tired smile. Because I realized, I'm not invisible anymore. They finally see me. You see me? Then he said something Daniel didn't expect. I don't want to hurt her. I just wanted her to remember who I was. Before she became who she is. Daniel frowned. Then why threaten her? Mark stood slowly. His hands were empty, his voice calm. Because pain is the only language she still understands? Outside, the agent watching through binoculars made a call. Subject located, no weapon visible, waiting for confirmation. Back inside, Daniel kept talking. There's a way out of this. Mark, you can stop now. You still have time. Mark looked down, then said something that made Daniel freeze. It's not me you should worry about. It's the one who gave me everything. Daniel's voice dropped. Who? Mark whispered. You'll find out soon then. He ran straight through the side door. By the time the agents entered, he was gone. Back in D.C., Kamala stared at a wall of names connected to the security breach. One name had just been confirmed by the FBI. Marla Jensen had worked security detail once before. A senator. Senator Langston, a longtime rival of Kamala's. A man who had publicly clashed with her more than once. Langston was known for playing dirty, but Kamala never imagined he'd stoop this low. That night, Kamala sat in her office. Alina placed a photo in front of her. It showed Mark from years ago, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Langston. Kamala leaned forward and whispered, this wasn't just about me. This was always a plan. Kamala Harris sat in silence. The photo in front of her showed two men, Mark, Danner, and Senator Langston, standing side by side at a political fundraiser from over a decade ago. Kamala stared at the image, her jaw tight. Langston wasn't just an enemy, he had always hated her success. He once said behind closed doors, she rose too fast. She skipped the waiting line. Now, it made sense. Mark hadn't just reappeared on his own. He was guided by someone who knew how to use pain like a weapon. Alina paced behind her, holding a fresh report from the FBI. They confirmed it, she said. Langston's office arranged for Mark to be hired temporarily at the Oakland event. Kamala looked up. Why would Langston take that risk? Alina answered without hesitation. Because if he could make you look unstable, emotional, unsafe, he could destroy you without laying a finger. Kamala whispered. So this wasn't about revenge. It was strategy. At that very hour, Daniel Ruiz met quietly with an FBI agent at a parking garage. He held copies of all the letters Mark had sent him. The agent flipped through the pages, then stopped at one. This letter here, he said, mentions a woman named Marla. He writes, Marla says she still hears from the man in the Capitol. Daniel nodded. Marla Jensen, Langston's old security hire. The agent's face darkened. Langston never got over being outshined. He didn't just help Mark, he used him as a tool, fed his anger, directed his pain, then let him go like a fire, he thought. He could control. Kamala watched old video footage of Langston giving speeches. He had always been calm, in public, measured, polite, sharp. But behind that smile, she saw it now. Jealousy. He was the kind of man who didn't mind playing dirt, long as no one saw his hands in the mud. And now, it was time to show the world the dirt. A press conference was scheduled at dawn. Kamala would go public not just with her story but with what Langston had done. She would reveal the manipulation, the betrayal, the entire network of silence and power that had allowed Mark to come so close. But just 2 hours before the event, Mark Danner called. Not the police, not the press. He called Kamala directly. The phone buzzed on Alina's desk. A restricted number. Alina answered, tense. A deep, quiet voice came through. I want to talk to her. One last time. Kamala heard the voice and took the phone without fear. She didn't speak right away. She waited. Finally Mark said, you found out, didn't you? Kamala answered calmly. Yes, I know now about Langston. About how he used you. Mark was silent for a long time, then said something that made Kamala feel a deep sadness. I thought I was fighting for myself, but I was just a weapon in someone else's war. Kamala replied, you were never invisible, Mark. You were hurt, but you let that pain turn into a knife, and someone else picked it up and aimed it. Mark asked quietly, do you hate me? Kamala didn't hesitate. Double quotes. No. I feel sorry for the boy I once knew. The man you became. I don't know him anymore. He didn't respond for several seconds, then finally said, they're coming for Langston, aren't they? Kamala said simply, yes, he whispered. Good. Then he hung up. The call ended, but the truth had already begun to move later. That morning, the press gathered in a bright white briefing room. Cameras flashed. Voices whispered. Kamala walked to the podium. There were no teleprompters, no written speech, just her. She looked out at the crowd and began. A week ago, I stood before you and shared something personal, a moment from my past I never wanted to relive. But what I didn't know then was that this pain was part of a bigger plan, a plan to break me, a plan led by someone who sits in this very government. Senator Langston didn't just use my name in backroom politics. He used a broken man Mark Danner like a loaded gun. He aimed him at my silence, but I refused to be quiet any longer. The room went still. Journalists leaned forward. Kamala continued, "This isn't about me anymore. This is about how easy it is for power to hide behind others, to point fingers without showing their own." But this time, we saw the hand behind the curtain. She stepped down from the podium, and the room erupted. Within hours, FBI agents arrived at Senator Langston's office. They took computers, hard drives, paper files. Staff members were questioned. Langston didn't appear on camera that day. He issued a brief written statement. "All allegations are politically motivated. I have nothing to hide." But the damage was done, in a quiet hotel across the city. Mark watched the conference on TV. He sat alone, wearing the same hoodie from before. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just whispered, "She said the truth, even after everything." Then, he placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was his final letter. It was addressed to the woman who kept walking. Back in her office, Kamala received that envelope later that evening. She opened it slowly. Inside, one sentence, handwritten, soft, unshaken. "I was wrong. You never erased me. I erased myself." She folded the letter, held it in her hand, and looked out the window toward the Capitol dome bathed in golden evening light. It had been 72 hours since Kamala Harris's press conference shook the political world. Senator Langston's office was under full investigation. Agents were still uncovering layers of secrets, files, deleted emails, all pointing to one thing, a quiet war against Kamala that had started long ago and ended with Mark Danner's collapse. But now, the attention had shifted again. Not to Langston, not to Mark, but to Kamala herself. News outlets swirled with opinions. Some called her brave. Some said she had gone too far. Some whispered that she had played the victim. Others claimed she had just exposed how power and pain really intersect. Kamala watched quietly from her office window, but she didn't feel powerful. She felt tired, not broken, but changed. Sometimes, the final storm, she thought, isn't outside you. It's the one you carry inside. Alina entered the room holding a tablet. "Ma'am, you need to see this," she said. Gently. Kamala turned on. The screen was a live town hall, being held by Senator Langston himself. He had finally come out of hiding. Clean-shaven.com, wearing a deep blue suit. His voice carried that same fake sincerity he had always used. "I regret that Mr. Danner was in pain," he said, "but I had no knowledge of his intentions, and I certainly never manipulated him. These accusations are not just wrong, they're dangerous." Kamala watched him lie without blinking. She knew he would try to twist the story, but what he said next made her blood run cold. "I think the American people deserve a leader who isn't guided by emotion, but by logic and strength. And I will do everything in my power to ensure that we're protected from reckless leadership." Alina looked at her. "He's going to run for president." Kamala nodded slowly, "And he's using my pain as proof I shouldn't." That evening, Kamala sat alone in her private study. She hadn't turned on the lights. She sat with just the glow of a desk lamp, and the letter from Mark still in her hand. "You never erased me. I erased myself." His words played again and again in her mind. He had been a man poisoned by silence, a man twisted by pain but also used by those who fed that pain for political gain. And now Langston wanted to erase her the same way, not by attacking her directly, but by using her own truth against her. The phone rang. It was Michelle Obama. Again, she didn't wait long. "Kamala," she said, "you know what this is, don't you?" Kamala answered, "Yes." "A test," Michelle replied. "One final test." Kamala took a deep breath. "I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid that if I speak again, people will say I'm making it all about me." Michelle responded with quiet power. "No, you're making it about all the women who were told to be quiet, the girls who never got to speak, the men who were never allowed to heal. This isn't just your storm, it's everyone's." The next morning, Kamala met with her team in a private meeting room. She stood at the head of the table. There were no papers, no charts, no data, just one question: should I walk away from this fight, or should I finish it? No one answered, right away. Then Alina stood up. Her voice cracked. "I watched you walk through fire, and you didn't run. You looked fear in the eye and kept walking. If that's not leadership, I don't know what is." That evening, Kamala made a decision. She would speak again, but this time, not to defend herself. This time, to call out the system, not with emotion alone, but with evidence. A team of whistleblowers had come forward, Langston's former assistants, aides, even a former campaign manager. Each one revealed the same story. Langston had monitored Kamala's schedule. He had indirectly, approved, Mark's placement at the Oakland event. He had intentionally pushed narratives that questioned her emotional fitness. And the final proof? An email Langston to one of his advisors. "We don't need to attack her. Just let the man from her past do the work." That email was all Kamala needed. The truth was no longer just in her hands, it was in black and white, as the press prepared for another wave. A message went out. Kamala would appear live the next night, this time, not for an interview, but to deliver an address to the nation. Some called it dangerous, some said it was bold, but everyone knew one thing: something was coming. As the night approached, Kamala stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her jacket. Alina walked in quietly. "Chance to cancel," she said with a small smile. Kamala looked at her reflection. "I didn't walk through all of this just to go quiet now." Across the city, people gathered in homes, bars, schools, offices. All eyes on the screen. The nation was waiting. For drama. Not for tears, but for truth. The final storm had arrived, and Kamala Harris was ready to walk straight through it.